My father threw me out when I was 15 and pregnant, just to protect his position as sheriff. 20 years later, he walked into a Veterans Day ceremony, expecting to meet a grandson and repair his reputation. Instead, he found me standing before him in the uniform of an army major. After everything he had done, what could he possibly say? My boots struck the polished wood floor of the National Guard armory. Folding chairs scraped into place. The master of ceremonies leaned toward the microphone and tapped it twice. The second tap sent a sharp burst of feedback through the room. I stood beyond the curtain in my army dress blues. The medals on my chest carried the weight of real knights, real names, and real decisions. That weight felt honest. Then the main doors opened. My father entered first. 20 years had bent his shoulders, but not his walk. He still moved like a man who believed every room belonged to him. My mother followed, both hands wrapped around her purse strap. She kept her eyes low. My brother came last, checking his phone again and again. Creditors and attorneys had been calling him for days, though I did not know that yet. All three scanned the room. Not for me, for teenage boys in junior military uniforms. For anyone who might fit the picture they had created. They were looking for an heir. My father saw me first. His eyes moved over my uniform and stopped at the rank on my shoulders. For 1 second, his face lost its practiced expression. Then his campaign smile returned. His gaze shifted to the person beside me. My daughter stood straight in her West Point uniform. She did not wave or smile. She did not step forward to make the moment easier for him. He looked past her. "Where's my grandson?" I let the silence sit between us. He had never asked my child's name. He had never asked her age or whether she was healthy, safe, or loved. He had only imagined a boy who might carry his name and repair what my brother had destroyed. I looked at the man who had once pushed me into winter darkness. You never had a grandson. You had a granddaughter you never bothered to ask about. The confidence in his face began to crack. What happened next belongs later in the story. 20 years earlier, my family had thrown me away because they believed I would stain their name. That morning, they had come believing my rank, my money, and my child could save it. They did not know I had returned because the truth had been used for 20 years by people who believed I would never be strong enough to claim it. Before the ceremony ended, my father would have to admit what he had done, or destroy himself in front of the town he had deceived. The microphone squealed again. In my memory, it became a brass deadbolt sliding into place on a freezing winter night. I was 15, 8 weeks pregnant. My father was running for re-election as county sheriff. When he found out, he did not ask whether I had seen a doctor. He did not ask whether anyone had hurt me. He did not ask if I was afraid. His first question was, "Who knows?" He wanted names, teachers, neighbors, people from church, anyone connected to the local paper. That was when I understood what frightened him, not what had happened to me, what people might say about him. A canvas bag sat beside the front door. Several shirts and a pair of jeans had already been pushed inside. My father had packed it before calling me downstairs. This was not anger in the moment. They had discussed it. My mother had known. My father pulled the coat from my shoulders. This family will not become a campaign scandal. My mother stood in the hallway wearing a pale robe. Her hands were folded over her stomach. She looked at me, but she did not move. My brother leaned over the upstairs railing. "So her room is mine now, right?" That was when I understood my disappearance would not feel like a tragedy to him. It would feel like extra space. I picked up the canvas bag and pressed one hand against the bottom. I believed my grandfather's dog tag was still hidden beneath the clothes. It was the only thing I owned that connected me to a man who had loved me without asking me to protect his reputation. I did not know my mother had already taken it. My father opened the door. Cold air rushed across the floor. Then I was outside. The door closed. The deadbolt clicked. When I was young, I thought cruelty always sounded like shouting. Later, I learned that sometimes the cruelest sound is a mother saying nothing while her husband locks the door. I stood on the porch for nearly 3 minutes. I expected my mother to open it. I thought she might bring a blanket, a few dollars, or one sentence telling me she was sorry. The hallway light went out, so I started walking. There was no sidewalk, no phone in my pocket, no money I could count on. I did not know where I would sleep, and I could barely feel my fingers by the time the road curved toward town. Almost 2 miles later, the lights of a gas station appeared through the darkness. I reached into my jeans and found 3 cold coins. They were enough for one call, and I knew I could not afford to call the wrong person. The 3 coins dropped into the payphone one at a time. Each made a dull metal click. I thought about calling an aunt or uncle, then pictured them calling my father before they came for me. Most of them believed the man he showed in public. The sheriff, the church volunteer, the man who shook hands at every parade. I needed someone who would believe me before he explained me away, so I called Ruth Callahan. She had supervised me on Saturday mornings at a veterans center. She was a retired first sergeant, not gentle in the usual way. She did not hug people when a clear instruction would work better. But when she gave her word, she kept it. The phone rang twice. I told her where I was. I told her I was pregnant. I told her my father had thrown me out. Then I told her I could barely feel my fingertips. She did not ask how I had gotten myself into trouble. She did not tell me to calm down. She only said, "Stay inside. Do not leave that phone. I am on my way." 15 minutes later, headlights swept across the wet pavement. Ruth arrived in an old Jeep carrying a green army blanket and a metal thermos. She checked my eyes, my breathing, and the red mark on my neck, where my father had pulled off my coat. Then she wrapped the blanket around me. Inside the Jeep, she raised the heat slowly. When I held my hands too close to the vent, she moved them back. "Too fast will hurt," she said. I thought she was taking me to her house. Then she turned toward the county hospital. Panic tightened my stomach. Hospitals asked questions. Hospitals called people. People called the sheriff. Ruth kept her eyes on the road. "What happened to you needs a record," she said. "People like your father count on there being no record." I did not yet understand how much that sentence would matter. The emergency room was bright and too warm. A nurse cut off my wet socks because the fabric had begun sticking to my skin. A doctor checked my temperature and the pregnancy. A monitor filled the room with a soft, steady rhythm. The social worker asked Ruth to wait outside. That mattered. Ruth had brought me there, but she did not speak for me. She let me tell the story myself. The social worker photographed the mark on my neck, listed everything in my canvas bag, and asked whether I had a safe place to go. When she called my father, his voice carried through the partly closed door. He did not ask whether I was warm. He did not ask whether the baby was safe. He said I had left by choice. He called me rebellious. He said I was trying to embarrass the family during an election. Ruth heard enough from the hallway. She did not argue with him. She looked at the social worker and said, "Write down his exact words." People with power do not always need to erase the truth. Sometimes they only need to tell a simpler story first. That night, someone understood that protecting me did not mean shouting louder than my father. It meant placing his words beside my temperature, my injuries, and the time I had been admitted. After my body warmed, I reached into the bag for my grandfather's dog tag. It was gone. I emptied everything onto the bed: shirts, jeans, a comb, a photograph, no dog tag. I searched again, more frightened than I had been when the doctor drew blood. Then I remembered my mother's hand touching the bag while my father pulled off my coat. I had thought she was closing the zipper. Now I understood. I did not know whether she took it from guilt, cruelty, or a need to keep part of me behind. At 15, the reason did not matter. She had let me leave, but kept the one thing I needed most. Ruth agreed to let me stay with her. The social worker explained that this was more than letting a teenager sleep on a couch. Ruth needed legal authority to take me to appointments, enroll me in school, and protect me if my father tried to force me back. My father did not appear at the emergency hearing. He sent someone to call me unstable and disobedient, but the hospital record existed, the photographs existed, my account had not changed. For the first time, an official system said his voice was not the only one that counted. That evening, Ruth showed me a small guest room. Clean clothes lay on the bed. Beside them were a notebook and a card with the time of my next meeting with the social worker. Ruth stood in the doorway. "Tomorrow, we make a plan. Tonight, you sleep." I looked around the unfamiliar room. It was the first night of my life when no one asked me to protect their reputation before I was allowed to feel safe. The next morning, a yellow sheet of paper waited on Ruth's kitchen table. Prenatal appointment, school enrollment, childcare, transportation, emergency contacts, money. I stared at the list until the words blurred. I wanted Ruth to promise that everything would work out. Instead, she placed a pen beside my hand. "Hope matters," she said, "but hope without a plan is just waiting." So we started with the first line. Months later, my daughter came into the world crying hard enough to fill the delivery room. When the nurse placed her against my chest, fear arrived before joy. I was not afraid that I would fail to love her. I was afraid that one day, under enough pressure, I might become like my mother. I might stand still when my child needed me to move. People often say that those who have been hurt know how to love better. I do not believe pain teaches that by itself. Pain only shows you what you never want to repeat. Everything else still has to be learned. Ruth did not let me promise to become the perfect mother. She told me to keep the next doctor's appointment, sleep when the baby slept, finish one class at a time, accept help before exhaustion became carelessness. My daughter's name was Emily. She had a serious face, tiny fists, and a habit of waking 10 minutes before my alarm. Ruth said that meant she already understood chain of command. For the first time in months, I laughed. I entered a flexible high school program for young mothers. After graduation, I enrolled at the community college and began studying nursing. My life became a schedule written in pencil because something always changed. I worked evening shifts at a diner. During breaks, I studied anatomy from flashcards that smelled like coffee and fryer oil. I calculated diapers, gas, and textbooks on the same sheet of paper. Sometimes there was enough for groceries or enough to fill the tank. Not both. I drove Ruth's old car to class and slept beside Emily's crib with an anatomy book open across my chest. Financial independence did not look like wealth. At first, it looked like paying the electric bill without calling the people who had hurt me. I used to think freedom meant needing no one. Later, I understood that freedom meant choosing who I trusted instead of returning to someone dangerous because I could not afford to leave. When I first visited the Army recruiting office, I believed determination would be enough. The recruiter explained that courage could not replace a degree, a nursing license, or a real plan for Emily's care. "You may have what it takes," he said, "but wanting it is not the same as being ready for it." The words felt like rejection. When I repeated them to Ruth, she looked at me over her coffee. "He did not say no," she said. "He gave you a list." That changed everything. I stopped thinking about the Army as an escape. I began treating it as a destination that required preparation. I finished my nursing program, built experience, and learned about the path into the Army Nurse Corps. I also learned that doing everything alone was not always strength. When I was tired, I became quiet. When I was afraid, I became even quieter. Part of me believed asking for help would make me weak. Ruth disagreed. "Discipline is choosing what helps the mission," she told me. Sometimes that means pushing through. Sometimes it means admitting you are exhausted before you hurt yourself or somebody else. Silence could be useful when it gave me time to observe, but silence could also be fear. My mother had taught me that. The difference was choice. One afternoon, an official letter arrived. I opened it at the same kitchen table where that first yellow list had been. I had been accepted into the training path that could lead me into the Army Nurse Corps as an officer. I did not celebrate right away. Emily was asleep nearby, one hand curled against her cheek. The letter meant training, time away, responsibility, and possible deployment. It also meant trusting someone else with the person I loved most. Ruth said she would help, but she would not let me build my future on a spoken promise. "We put it in writing," she said. "We make a real family care plan." That night, I understood that I was no longer only trying to survive what my parents had done. I was building a life that did not revolve around them. Before I tell you what happened when I finally put on the uniform, please tell me where you are watching or listening from and what time it is where you live right now. I read those comments because they help me imagine who is sharing this journey with me and what part of your day my story has reached. A few months later, I stood before a mirror in uniform for the first time. I believed I had left the sound of that deadbolt behind me. I was wrong. Years later, in a field hospital without power, that sound came back. The generator died in the middle of a surgery. 1 second, the field hospital was filled with its steady hum. The next, everything dropped into emergency light. A young soldier lay on the table, losing blood faster than we could replace it. The monitors flickered. One infusion pump stopped. My team looked at me. I did not raise my voice. Hold the light. Check the line. Call maintenance. Write down the time. Keep talking to him. The room was still chaotic, but chaos became easier once it had names. I had learned that years earlier, on a road outside my hometown. When everything feels impossible, you do not solve all of it at once. You find the next thing that must be done. We stabilized the soldier by hand until backup power came online. Then the metal door behind me swung shut. The lock snapped into place. For one breath, I was no longer in the hospital. I was 15 again, standing on a frozen porch. My father was inside. My mother was 3 steps away from the door. The light was going out. My heart began to race. My hands went cold inside my gloves. The edges of the room narrowed. A nurse beside me noticed. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I could have said yes. For years, that had been my answer to everything. Instead, I said, "Give me 10 seconds. I counted my breathing. 4 in, 4 out. I felt the floor under my boots. I named the things in front of me. The table, the light, the patient, the people waiting for me. After 10 seconds, I returned. For a long time, I believed strength meant the past could no longer reach me. I was wrong. Strength meant recognizing when it had reached me, then refusing to let it choose my next move. That night changed the way I led. I later wrote a simple procedure for power loss in field treatment areas. It covered manual monitoring, backup lighting, medication checks, and who was responsible for each step. It was not dramatic, it was useful. That mattered more. Over the years, I completed an overseas assignment, led medical teams, and took responsibility for people whose lives depended on calm decisions. I received a Bronze Star and, later, a Meritorious Service Medal. After more than a decade of service, I was promoted to Major. My father had once wanted a title that made other people step aside. I learned that rank was not meant to make anyone smaller. It was there to remind me that when plans failed, equipment broke, or fear entered the room, responsibility stopped with me. While I was away, Ruth helped care for Emily. She never replaced me, and I never asked her to. Emily and I lived through short video calls, letters, missed holidays, and promises I learned not to make unless I could keep them. Once, I missed a school ceremony she had been waiting for all year. When we spoke afterward, she tried to say she understood. I heard the anger beneath the words. "You are allowed to be proud of me and still be angry that I was not there," I told her. She cried. So did I. Then we talked again the next day. That was one way I knew our family was different. We did not punish each other with silence. We repaired what we could after we hurt one another. Ruth's health began to fail not long after my promotion. There was no sudden tragedy, just appointments, weaker mornings, and the slow change in her voice when she became tired. We both knew time was getting shorter. During one of our last conversations, I asked whether she thought I should ever return home. She shook her head. "Do not spend the rest of your life standing outside a door that should never have been closed on you." She died a few weeks later. At her funeral, a folded flag was placed in my hands. I had held wounded soldiers, newborn babies, and frightened families. Nothing had ever felt as heavy as that flag. Ruth had been the one person who came for me without first asking whether I deserved to be saved. Chosen family was not perfect family. Ruth had been strict. Emily had been angry with me. I had shut down when I should have spoken. The difference was that we came back to the conversation. We did not use silence as a weapon. After the funeral, I sat alone in my car with the folded flag on the passenger seat. My phone lit up with a local article sent by someone I used to know. In the photograph, my father was pinning a deputy's badge onto my brother's uniform. Both were smiling beneath a headline about continuing a family tradition of service. I looked at the picture for a long time. My father had placed all his faith in the child he kept. He did not understand that indulgence can destroy a person more slowly than rejection, but just as completely. The article called it a proud moment for our county. My father stood beneath the seal of the sheriff's department and told the reporter that every family needed a new generation to carry forward its tradition of honor. In the photograph, he was pinning a deputy's badge onto my brother's uniform. That was when I understood something I had missed for years. My father had not given my brother a job. He had given him a role. My brother had grown up believing our last name would open doors, that our father would fix every mistake, and that a badge deserved respect even if the man wearing it had done nothing to earn it. At first, the complaints were easy for my father to dismiss. A restaurant owner said my brother hinted that inspections might become a problem unless his meals stayed free. A young woman reported that he had stopped her 3 times without writing a ticket. Each time, he asked where she worked and whether she lived alone. Another deputy said he arrived late smelling like bourbon and mouthwash. My father called all of it resentment. Then a convenience store camera recorded my brother accepting cash from a contractor after ignoring an overloaded truck and a suspended license. The video showed an ordinary man with authority, convinced that rules belong to other people. State investigators opened a case. My brother was suspended, questioned, and eventually stripped of his badge. When the story reached the paper, my father did not ask what his son had done to the people he was supposed to protect. He asked who had leaked the video. For most of my life, I believed my father loved my brother more than he loved me. As I grew older, I saw something more complicated. What he gave my brother was not always love. Sometimes it was ownership. He had turned his son into an extension of himself, then protected him from every consequence that might have forced him to grow. Each time my brother fell, my father bought him another piece of ground. He never made him learn how to stand. After the badge was gone, my father used most of his retirement savings to open a private security company for him. They rented an office larger than they needed, bought vehicles before signing steady clients, and printed glossy brochures calling my brother a seasoned law enforcement professional. My father made him director and paid him a salary the company could not support. Some early income came through security contracts connected to a community charity my father controlled. On paper, it looked legitimate. In practice, it kept family money moving in a circle while everyone pretended it was business. The company did not fail because someone sabotaged it. My brother missed appointments. He ignored tax notices. He let insurance lapse. He lost clients and blamed the employees who quit. He used the company card for sports betting and hid the charges under vague business expenses. Within a year, a vehicle had been repossessed. The business account was frozen. Creditors filed suit. His wife moved out after discovering debts he had never mentioned. Then he began calling people he had once treated as beneath him. He did not apologize. He asked for loans. I followed the collapse through local reports and occasional messages. I never called him. I never interfered. For years, I thought watching my family fall apart might feel like victory. When it happened, it felt empty. I saw people who had spent their lives moving consequences onto someone else, finally running out of places to put them. Not long after that, I was assigned to a military medical program serving rural communities with limited access to care. When I read the list of counties, I saw the name of the place where I had grown up. I reported the connection to my commanding officer immediately. I told him my father had been sheriff, that my family still had influence there, and that I had not spoken to them in years. "You are there to lead a medical mission, Major," he said, "not to settle a family matter." "Understood, sir." He made the boundaries clear. I was not to use military personnel to investigate my family. I was not to enter local politics. Any private legal issue had to go through a civilian attorney. If my family tried to interfere, I was to report it. I accepted every condition. Power had been used against me when I was young. I had no intention of using mine the same way. Weeks later, I drove the command vehicle past the county line. The old road still curved toward the gas station where I had once made a call with 3 coins. The payphone was gone, but the faded canopy remained. I thought that would be the hardest thing to see. Then our convoy entered the town square. A large banner hung across the building opposite the courthouse. On it was a photograph of me at 15. Beneath my face were the words, "Claire's Hope Fund, help us bring vulnerable daughters home." I stared at the girl in that picture. My father had not only lied about why I disappeared, he had turned my disappearance into a brand. I stood beneath the banner longer than I meant to. People passed through the square and noticed the rank on my uniform, but none recognized the girl in the photograph above me. 2 older women stopped nearby and spoke about the fund with respect. They remembered my father speaking at dinners and church events. According to him, his daughter had been lured away by a dangerous man and never came home. One said the family still left an empty chair at Thanksgiving. I kept my face still. Then I went back to work. That day, I examined elderly patients, adjusted medication for a retired firefighter, and spoke with families who had no reliable insurance. Near the end of the afternoon, I recognized the owner of a small grocery store who had once slipped food into my backpack. He did not recognize me. My father had used my pain to raise money from these people. I had come back to help them with blood pressure, insulin, breathing treatments, and problems that did not disappear after a speech. A few days later, I treated Eleanor Price, the widow of a retired colonel and longtime head of the local Veterans Council. While I checked her breathing, she told me about the sheriff's missing daughter. She said the county had prayed for that girl. She had donated to the fund and believed my father had spent years searching. "Did anyone ever hear the daughter's side?" I asked. Eleanor looked confused. "There was no daughter's side," she said. "She disappeared." That answer stayed with me. My father had not only convinced people that I was wrong, he had convinced them there was no living person left to question him. I began with public records. The fund had been created a few years after I was thrown out. At first, it supported some real community programs. People saw a little good and stopped asking harder questions. Over time, the costs grew. My brother received money for community outreach. His security company was paid to work fund events. Donations supported activities that kept my father visible. My photograph appeared in mailers, campaign material, and fundraising displays. For years, I thought the worst thing my father had done was take away my home. I was wrong. That night had taken my shelter. What came after took my right to tell my own story. He became the grieving father. I became the ungrateful daughter. Then he asked the town to pay for his pain. I remembered my commanding officer's warning. I did not ask anyone in uniform to help me investigate. I hired a civilian attorney who understood public records and nonprofit organizations. I contacted a local investigative reporter. We requested files from the hospital and courthouse. My attorney gave me one instruction: do not confront them yet. Preserve first. Speak later. The records came over several weeks in calls, certified letters, scanned files, and thick envelopes. The emergency room report listed hypothermia and pregnancy. Photographs showed the mark on my neck. The social worker's notes recorded my father's claim that I had left by choice. The court order showed that he knew where I was, when he later told the town I had vanished. We found videos of his speeches, financial records from the fund, and payments to my brother's company. Then one envelope arrived with Ruth's name on it. Before she died, she had written a sworn statement. She described my call, the condition she found me in, the hospital visit, and my father's refusal to come. She wrote that he had accused her of turning me against the family. The final sentence was short. She was not missing, she was discarded. I stopped reading. I placed my hand over Ruth's signature. Even near the end of her life, she had still been protecting the truth of mine. That night, I wrote a speech. I listed every lie. I attacked my father. I called my brother a failure. I demanded that my mother choose a side. I wanted the town to feel ashamed. When I read it back, I heard something I did not like. I sounded like my father. I wanted to control the room and decide what everyone should feel. So I tore up the speech, not the evidence. The records had already been copied, delivered to my attorney, shared with the reporter, and stored beyond my family's reach. Dignity did not mean ignoring what they had done. It meant refusing to let anger make me careless with the truth. After my attorney left, my phone began to ring. The number was local. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Hello, little sister," my brother said. His voice was too warm. "It has been a long time." I looked through the window at the banner with my 15-year-old face. He said the family missed me. He said our parents were getting older and old wounds needed to heal. Less than a minute later, he was talking about the company, the debt, and a temporary situation that required money. I stayed silent. Then I heard my father take the phone from him. "Your mother and I deserve to meet our grandson." I let the sentence sit between us. "What makes you think I have a son?" The line went quiet. Then my father said people in town had told him I had a child and a successful military career. He did not know my child's name or age, but he had already decided she was a boy. A grandson fit the picture he needed. A male heir. A fresh face for the fund. Someone who could replace the son who had failed him and open a door to my money. I used to think men like my father did not listen. Later, I understood that they listened for the parts of your life they could use. My brother took the phone again and returned to the company. He called the problem temporary. When I asked how much he needed, he avoided the number. A few simple questions brought out the truth. The company was being sued. Vehicles had been taken back. He owed taxes. He had used a business card for sports betting. Money from my father's fund had gone into the company, and he needed a large payment before the end of the week. "You're a major now," he said. "You can afford to help your own family. My rank doesn't make me your bank." The warmth left his voice. He asked how I could be so cold after everything our parents had suffered because of me. 20 years had passed, but in their story, they were still the victims. Manipulation often begins by changing the name of something. They called money help. They called control family. They called their consequences the pain I had caused them. My father took the phone back. "There's no reason for this to become ugly." Then he told me about the reunion he had already planned. The Claire's Hope Fund was preparing a major event. He had told the board that our family might soon be reunited. A local reporter had been invited. He wanted me and my supposed grandson beside him on stage. He believed the photograph would restore donor confidence. I had never agreed. "People have prayed for this reunion for 20 years, he said. "Don't embarrass your mother by refusing now." He was not asking me to come home. He was assigning me a role. "Did you tell them I agreed?" He avoided the question. "Did you use my name to raise money again?" After a pause, he said, "You owe this town closure." "No, you owe this town the truth." I ended the call after confirming that the voicemail and call record had been saved. The next morning, my brother appeared at the mobile clinic. His expensive coat was wrinkled. His phone kept lighting up. He tried to pass the staff entrance. "I just need 5 minutes with my sister." Security told him to wait outside. He answered that our family had once run the county. When I stepped outside, his friendly voice disappeared. He said our father had promised donors I would appear. If I refused, they would tell the press I was using the mission for attention. They would say I had abandoned my elderly parents. He claimed he could create political trouble for the program. "Are you threatening a federal medical mission because I won't pay your debts?" He noticed the security camera and lowered his voice. Then he grabbed my wrist. "You don't get to come back here and act like you're better than us." I kept my voice level. "Take your hand off me." Security moved closer. He released me, but kept shouting that I owed the family everything I had. As they escorted him away, he turned back. "Dad made you who you are." "No. He made sure he wasn't there when I became who I am." I reported the incident, preserved the footage, sent a copy to my attorney, and returned to work. I once believed silence meant letting someone else win, but silence has two forms. There was my mother's silence, which protected the person with power, and there was the silence of someone who saved the evidence, called an attorney, and went back to work. One was fear, the other was control. After the clinic closed, I called my father, "Come to the Veterans Day ceremony at the National Guard Armory." He asked whether I was bringing his grandson. "You'll meet the family I built." He assumed I had surrendered. I heard him tell my mother that the reunion would save the fund. My brother asked whether we could discuss the money after the ceremony. I did not correct them. I had stopped rescuing them from the assumptions their own greed had created. Some people enter a trap because it looks exactly like something they want to own. If you are still listening, please leave a comment below and tell me how satisfied you are with the story so far. It helps me know that there are still people walking beside me through this journey. Your presence is the greatest encouragement I have as I continue toward the final part. 3 days before the ceremony, my daughter entered my office. I placed an old photograph in front of her and asked whether she truly wanted to stand beside me when the whole town learned the truth. I placed the old photograph on my desk first. Then I added a flyer from Claire's Hope Fund, a copy of the hospital report, several pictures of my father speaking at fundraising events, and the voicemail where he kept calling my child his grandson. Emily looked at everything without touching it. "You do not owe me a performance," I told her. "And you do not owe them a meeting." She picked up the fundraiser flyer and studied the picture of me at 15. "Do they know I'm a woman?" They never asked. The room went quiet. She looked at me for several seconds, and I could see the anger building behind her eyes. But Emily did not rush to tell me what I wanted to hear. That was one of the things I admired most about her. She asked the question I had been avoiding. "Do you want the truth to come out, or do you want them to hurt?" I leaned back in my chair. For years, I had imagined my father losing control in front of the same people he had deceived. I had imagined my mother finally feeling the cold she had left me in. I had written a speech that named every lie and every failure. Part of me still wanted them to feel pain. For a long time, I wanted them to hurt, I said. Now I want them to stop owning the story. Emily did not answer right away. Children do not exist to finish the battles their parents never resolved. My father had spent years turning his children into tools for his reputation. If I forced Emily to stand beside me only to make him suffer, I would be repeating the same thing I claimed to hate. I pushed Ruth's sworn statement across the desk. Emily read it slowly. When she reached the final sentence, she stopped. She was not missing. She was discarded. She looked up. Did Ruth ever say anything bad about them to me? No. She only said that people show you who they are through what they do. Emily read the sentence again. Then she told me she would attend the ceremony, but only on her own terms. She would not pretend there was a reunion. She would not hug anyone or pose for photographs unless she wanted to. She would not answer questions about her private life. She would not allow the fund to use her image, and if she felt like someone was turning her into a symbol, she would leave. I agreed to every condition. That agreement mattered more than her decision to come. My family had always treated love like a debt. Emily and I treated it like trust. She was not standing beside me because I demanded it. She was standing beside me because she had chosen to. Later that afternoon, my attorney called. The records had been copied and stored in more than one place. The financial material connected to the fund had been forwarded to the proper offices. The reporter's investigation was scheduled to appear on Veterans Day morning. My attorney warned me not to accuse anyone of a crime before an official finding. Stay with what the records prove, he said. I told him I understood. My commanding officer gave me a similar warning. You are being honored for the mission, he said. Do not turn the ceremony into a private tribunal. I promised that I would not start a confrontation, but I also told him that if my father tried to take the microphone and stage a false reunion, I would not stand there and let him rewrite my life again. The night before the ceremony, my mother called. It was the first time I had heard her voice in 20 years. She did not ask how I was. She did not ask about Emily. She said my father had been under great pressure. Please do not humiliate him tomorrow. I let the silence stretch before I answered. Did you ever ask him not to humiliate me? She said nothing. Then she told me he was older now, that Blake was not doing well, and that the family needed a new beginning. A new beginning for whom? Again, she had no answer. People who avoid conflict often say they only want peace, but if peace always requires the wounded person to stay quiet, it is not peace. It is comfort for the person who caused the harm. The next morning, I fastened the final medal to my uniform. Emily stood beside me in her West Point uniform, checking the position of her collar in the mirror. My phone lit up. The investigation had been published. The headline described a charity, a missing girl who had never been missing, and money that had flowed into the son's failing company. I turned off the screen. Outside the armory doors, I could already hear my father greeting donors. He sounded exactly as he always had, like the most important man in the room. The armory doors opened, and the room changed before anyone said a word. The conversations near the entrance grew softer. Chairs stopped scraping. A few people looked up from their programs. My father walked in with the same posture he had carried as sheriff. He was older, but he still moved like recognition belonged to him. This time, the room did not meet him the way it once had. One man who used to shake his hand turned toward the wall display. A donor glanced down at her phone. A member of the fund board stepped away from his group. The reporter stood near the aisle with a notebook in one hand. My mother noticed the distance. She tightened her grip on her purse and looked from face to face. My brother kept checking his phone. Every few seconds, his thumb moved across the screen as if he could measure how far the article had spread. My father saw me near the side of the stage. Then he began looking around. He studied the younger cadets, the sons of several veterans, and the teenagers wearing Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps uniforms. His eyes moved from one boy to another. He was looking for a face that might resemble his own. Finally, he pointed toward Emily. "Is he backstage?" For a second, I did not understand what he meant. Then he asked louder, "Where's my grandson?" Emily looked directly at him. She did not answer for me. "You never had one," I said. "You had a granddaughter you never bothered to ask about." My father turned toward her. "You're Claire's child?" Emily held his gaze. "I'm my mother's daughter." She did not offer him our family name. She did not step into the place he had prepared for her. His expression tightened, then changed into the smile he used in public. "Well, a granddaughter is just as wonderful." A moment later, he called her Evelyn. Emily's name was not Evelyn. He reached for her as the reporter lifted a camera. Emily stepped back. "Please don't touch me." My mother looked hurt, but she did not ask why a young woman meeting her grandparents for the first time might not feel safe. My brother moved close enough that only I could hear him. He told me not to ruin the reunion before we discussed the money. "There is no money," I said. His face changed at once. "There is a simple way to learn whether someone wants reconciliation or access to what you own. Remove money from the conversation. If the kindness disappears with it, you have your answer." The master of ceremonies asked everyone to take their seats. I ended the conversation and turned toward the stage. The ceremony was not about my family. It belonged to the veterans in the room, the medical teams who had served beside me, the people our program had treated, and those who had carried responsibilities no audience would ever fully see. My commanding officer introduced me. He spoke about the rural medical program, the emergency procedures our teams had developed, and the decisions that had protected patients when resources failed. He spoke about responsibility more than medals. That mattered to me. I walked onto the stage. From there, I could see the grocery store owner who had slipped food into my backpack years earlier. The retired firefighter sat near the aisle. Eleanor Price was in the front row. Several hospital employees were gathered behind her. There were donors who had believed my father. There were also people holding printed copies of the investigation. When the medal was placed on my uniform, I looked toward my family. My father did not clap at first. He was watching the crowd, already calculating how he might attach himself to the moment. My mother was crying. I could not tell whether the tears came from pride, regret, or fear. My brother looked at me the way a desperate man looks at a bank door after hearing the lock turn. For years, I believed public recognition would feel like defeating my father. Standing there, I understood something different. My rank was not the answer to the night he threw me out. I did not need to become a major to prove that a pregnant 15-year-old deserved protection. I had deserved it before the uniform. Before the degree, before anyone in that room knew my name, the applause faded. The master of ceremonies stepped forward to continue the program. My father stood. He moved into the aisle and raised his voice just enough for the people around him to hear. As her father, I'd like to say a few words. The master of ceremonies hesitated. My father did not wait for permission. He climbed the steps and reached toward the microphone. Before his hand touched it, Eleanor Price rose from the front row. Her voice carried across the room. Before you speak, Raymond, you're going to answer one question. Eleanor held up a printed copy of the investigation. Why does the hospital record say your 15-year-old daughter was admitted with hypothermia and no guardian on the same night you told us she ran away? My father looked at her, then toward the reporter near the aisle. For the first time that morning, he seemed to understand that the room no longer belonged to him. That article is a distortion written by people who do not understand what our family endured. Eleanor did not sit down. Did you throw her out? He answered with a story about a troubled teenager, a worried household, and private matters outsiders could never understand. He did not say no. I stepped closer to the microphone. I had no speech in my hand. The words I had written in anger were already gone. Why did the hospital photograph bruising on my neck? My father said I had been upset and confused. He said memories changed over time. Why did an emergency judge place me with another guardian the next morning? He said Ruth had manipulated me. He called her a bitter woman who distrusted law enforcement. Anger rose when he used her name, but I kept my voice even. Why did you tell this town you spent years searching for me when you knew exactly who had custody? He said he had been trying to protect the family. Which family? The question settled over the room. My mother stood. This is not the place. I looked at her. You said that 20 years ago without saying a word. Her face folded. She asked me to stop and speak with them privately. The lie was public, I said. The correction cannot be private. People often ask for privacy when the truth threatens a public image. My father had repeated his story in speeches, fundraisers, campaign events, and church halls. The truth did not need a stage for revenge. It needed the same reach as the lie. My brother jumped to his feet. He shouted that I was destroying a charity that had helped real people. If the fund helped people, those records will show it. So will the records of what it paid your company. He moved into the aisle, saying the finances were private family business. A member of the fund board turned toward him. Did your company receive money from Claire's Hope Fund? My brother opened his mouth, then looked at our father. He did not answer. The panic on his face did more than any accusation could have done. Several donors began whispering. One board member reached for her phone. My father stepped onto the stage and took the microphone. The smile was gone. He said nobody understood what it had been like to serve as sheriff in a conservative county. He said an election could be destroyed by one family scandal. He said he had carried the burden of difficult choices for years. His voice grew louder. Because no sheriff could keep a pregnant 15-year-old under his roof and survive the scandal. The room went still. A veteran near the front removed the fund pin from his jacket. A donor folded her program. The grocery store owner who had once fed me lowered his head. My mother closed her eyes. My brother sat down. The reporter checked the light on his recorder. One member of the fund board stepped into the hallway and made a call. My father had spent 20 years trying to control the meaning of that night. Then he confirmed it in one sentence. I held out my hand for the microphone. He resisted for half a second, then gave it to me. I did not call him Dad. Mr. Dawson. He looked at me. You did not lose a daughter. You threw one away and then raised money pretending you wanted her back. I stopped there. Some truths become weaker when we keep explaining them. I did not need to list every cold mile or every year he had stolen my story. He had already shown them who he was. The room did not react as one body. Some people left quietly, others remained in their seats, stunned. The fund board asked that every financial record be preserved. Eleanor told my father to step away from the stage. Security moved closer, but no one arrested him. My commanding officer ended the formal program before the room turned into chaos. The reporter stayed behind the boundary my attorney had arranged. No microphone was pushed into my face. My father looked from one person to another, waiting for someone to defend him. No one stepped forward. When the ceremony ended, my attorney approached me near the side exit. The funds board just voted to freeze the accounts. An investigation had begun. That did not mean anyone would be arrested that day. Real justice rarely arrives on a stage. It comes through records, audits, sworn statements, and months when powerful people can no longer stop the questions. It is less dramatic than an arrest. It is also more durable. Emily walked beside me into the parking lot. My mother was waiting near our car. Both hands were closed around a small piece of old metal. I recognized it before she spoke. My grandfather's dog tag. The parking lot had begun to empty. Behind us, the armory doors opened and closed as people left in small groups. The voices from inside had faded into a low murmur. My mother stood beside our car, looking smaller than I remembered. Her makeup had run beneath her eyes. The careful posture of a former sheriff's wife was gone. She opened her hand. My grandfather's dog tag rested in her palm. The chain was tangled around her fingers. I did not reach for it. I kept it because it was all I had left of you. I looked at the metal, then at her. You had me that night. The words stopped her. For 20 years, she had been able to tell herself that she had lost a daughter. My answer reminded her that loss had not simply happened to her. She had made a choice. My mother lowered her eyes. I was afraid of your father. She told me he had controlled the money, decided who she could see, and made every disagreement feel like a threat to the family. Whenever she questioned him, he warned that she would destroy everything they had built. She said she had believed she had nowhere to go. On the night he put me outside, she convinced herself that I was young, strong, and would find a way to survive. After that, shame made every phone call feel harder. Weeks became months, months became years. I listened. I did not know how much of her account was complete. Fear can distort memory, just as guilt can. But I believed the fear itself was real. For many years, I had seen my mother only as a coward. Growing older taught me that fear can make a person's world so small that every possible door seems locked. Understanding that did not erase what happened. Compassion and boundaries could exist at the same time. I believe you were afraid, I said. She lifted her face. Hope appeared so quickly that it hurt to see. I was 15. You were my mother. Her mouth trembled. She said she was sorry. She said it more than once, as if repetition might carry her back through time. I believe you regret it, I told her. But regret does not make you safe. The hope in her face changed. She looked past me toward Emily and asked if she could meet her granddaughter properly. Emily remained quiet. She did not pressure me to forgive, and she did not speak for me. I was grateful for that. Not now, I said, and not because you are crying in a parking lot. Trust is built through consistent actions, not one emotional moment. My mother nodded, though I could tell she had hoped for something easier. I finally reached for the dog tag. The metal was colder than I expected. The edges had worn smooth from years of being held. I am taking back what belonged to Grandpa, I said. I am not taking you back into my life today. Today was not a promise. It was also not a permanent sentence made in the middle of a painful moment. It meant the choice belonged to me now. My mother asked if there was anything she could do. Tell the truth without asking me to reward you for it. She understood what I meant. She could cooperate with the fund board. She could turn over records. She could stop protecting my father and brother. She could tell the truth without making herself the center of the story. And she could accept that honesty might not earn her a relationship with me or Emily. She closed her empty hand and walked away. After she reached the far end of the parking lot, Emily looked at me. "Are you okay?" The old answer rose automatically. "I am fine." I let it go. "No," I said, "but I am steady." Emily nodded. After a moment, she asked whether I thought I would ever forgive my mother. "Maybe forgiveness is not the first question," I said. "Safety is. People often ask the wounded person when they will forgive. Fewer people ask what the person who caused the harm has done to become safe. Forgiveness is personal. Access to my life is a separate decision." I placed the dog tag in the inside pocket of my uniform, close to the metal that had been pinned there that morning. Emily and I turned toward the car. Then I heard quick footsteps behind us. My brother was running from the armory. The confidence he had carried into the building was gone. He called my name. "Please," he said, "I'm out of options." My brother stopped in front of the car, breathing hard. He said the business accounts had been frozen. The fund board was reviewing every payment. Creditors were preparing to sue, and our father no longer had the money or influence to make the problem disappear. If I did not transfer money, he could lose his house. Then he used the words he had been saving for last. "We're family." I looked at the man who had once asked whether he could take my bedroom before my footprints disappeared from the porch. When did that word begin to include me? He had no answer. First, he called me his little sister. Then he said our mother could not survive watching the family fall apart. After that, he reminded me that I had a good salary. Helping him, he said, would barely affect my life. When none of that worked, the softness left his voice. If you had not come back, none of this would be happening. It was already happening, I said. I just stopped helping you hide it. People who refuse responsibility often confuse the cause of a problem with the moment it becomes visible. I did not create his debt. I did not move money from the fund. I did not make him accept bribes or bet with company money. My return had not destroyed his life. It had only removed the places where he had hidden his choices. I reached into my pocket and took out a card I had prepared before the ceremony. It listed a gambling treatment program, a bankruptcy attorney, a counseling center, and a crisis line. "Family is not a line of credit," I said. "This is the only help I am offering." He stared at the card as though I had insulted him. "You're really going to leave me like this?" "No. I'm leaving you with the consequences of your own choices." He did not take the card at first. Then he did. I did not know whether he would use any of those numbers. Offering help did not make me responsible for what he chose next. Over the following weeks, the fund accounts remained frozen while an independent audit began. The district attorney confirmed that the records were under review. My father stepped down from the Veterans Council. Several donors asked for their money back. My brother worked with an attorney. My mother turned over financial files and agreed to answer questions. No one was led away in handcuffs that morning. Real justice rarely arrives on a stage. It comes through records, audits, sworn statements, and months when powerful people can no longer stop the questions. It is less dramatic than an arrest. It is also more durable. Emily and I got into the car. On the center console rested my grandfather's dog tag, Ruth's folded flag, the Veterans Day program, and a photograph of Emily in her West Point uniform. 3 generations sat between us. A man who had loved me without conditions, a woman who had chosen to protect me, and a daughter I had raised to know that love did not require surrender. I started the engine. Emily looked at me. "Do you feel better?" I thought about it. "I feel free." We drove past the old gas station. The payphone was gone. Only a pale square of concrete remained. I did not look toward my childhood home, not because I was afraid of the past, because it no longer had the right to decide where I was going. For years, I believed freedom would come when my father admitted he was wrong, when my mother apologized in exactly the right way, and when the town understood that I had never been the disgrace. But my worth had existed before the uniform, the medals, and the applause. The 15-year-old girl on that porch deserved protection before she had done anything to prove herself. Success did not make me valuable. It only helped me understand that my value had never belonged to my parents to grant or take away. Real family is not defined by a shared last name. It is defined by who comes for you in the cold, who protects the truth when you cannot protect it yourself, and who respects your boundaries even when they are painful. Are you satisfied with the way I handled my parents and my brother? Do you think I was right to take back my grandfather's dog tag while refusing to give my mother access to Emily? Or should I have offered her another chance? And if you had been in my place, would you have given my brother the money? Please share your level of satisfaction and your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes, the answer reveals more than how we see one story. It reveals the boundaries we have had to learn in our own lives. What do you think about the decision she made? Would you have handled anything differently if you were in her place? Please share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. If this story gave you something to think about, please leave a like, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe so you do not miss the stories still to come. I will see you in the next story. We are Honor Family Radio, using stories to help you walk through the years, rediscover peace, and find strength within your heart.